Natural gas extraction, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County and the University of Scranton's Task Force on Sustainability. My name is Bonnie Oldham. Before I introduce the speakers, let me take a moment to let you know why the League organized this event. From time to time, the League selects issues to study because they think the voice of the League could be useful as the different branches of government develop policies about that issue. At the League's state convention in 2009, the delegates selected Marcellus Shale natural gas extraction as an issue to study further. Therefore, the Lackawanna League organized this forum in cooperation with the University of Scranton in order to educate both our League members and the community about the issue of natural gas extraction. Each of our presenters will speak for 15 minutes, followed by a moderated discussion. We will conclude with a question and answer period. Index cards were distributed as you entered the auditorium. If you have a question, please write it on the index card. Cards will be collected and given to the moderator, who will ask the questions as time allows. The forum will conclude at 9 p.m., even if all of the questions haven't been answered. I ask that if you have a cell phone, please take it out now and set it to either vibrate or turn it off so as not to disturb the presenters. Tonight we have two speakers representing the Marcellus Shale industry. Wendy Stratman is president of XOPA, and Matt Shepard is Senior Director of Corporate Development and Government Affairs for Chesapeake Energy Corporation. Pam Fendrock represents Penn Future, a membership-driven public interest organization that enforces environmental laws. Penn Future also advocates for the transformation of public policy, public opinion, and the marketplace to restore and protect Pennsylvania's environment and safeguard public health. Originally from Carbondale, Pam graduated from the University of Pennsylvania and worked in a number of fields, including print and television news, in numerous places before returning to northeastern Pennsylvania in 2002. Pam works on many issues with Penn Future, but perhaps because of her roots in the anthracite region, she has a particular interest in Pennsylvania's natural gas boom. Pat Carrillo has been a community organizer and environmental activist for 4 decades. He is a working communications professional and video artist. Pat is co-founder of DamascusCitizens.org, a grassroots 5013C not-for-profit organization. Since 2001, Pat and his wife have lived in the upper Delaware River. He also founded UDPC.net and was successful in leading an effort to protect the upper Delaware River from the construction of the massive NYRI power line. The missing speaker this evening is Jennifer Means. I don't know what happened to her. We invited her. She is the representative that we invited from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. So, I really haven't heard from her, but if she should come before, her turn comes along, then we'll go ahead and allow her to speak. And then the moderator for this evening's forum, Terry Ohms, is the executive director of the Institute for Public Policy and Economic Development, a think tank that provides essential research analysis and consultation to cities, counties, nonprofits, school districts, institutions, and businesses. The principal purpose of the Institute is to increase the capacity of organizations to solve their own problems and become thriving and sustaining entities with the ultimate goal of creating a better quality of life and standard of living for the community. Currently, the Institute is working on its first statewide initiative focusing on the Marcellus Shale play. Ms. Ohms has served as an associate research fellow with the Pennsylvania State Legislature Office of Research since 2006. She is a cum laude graduate of the University of Scranton with a BS in Public Administration and an MBA in Finance. Please welcome all of our panelists.
Thank you, Bonnie. This is an incredible opportunity that we all have before us tonight, not only with the cadre of speakers that we have, but the topic that we have for discussion. And in preparation for tonight's event, I Googled how to be an effective moderator. And no matter what I Googled, I got this list of 10 rules to follow, with everything from being respectful of the audience's time to reminding the moderator that they're not a panelist, so they shouldn't speak forever, and directing the discussion and controlling the environment. Words I like, but for those of you who know me, and I know several of you in the audience from different capacities, 10 rules for me are way too many. So tonight I'm going to be exercising some judgment, and you as audience members get to exercise judgment as well. Despite the cadre of speakers up here, you're not going to walk away with a full understanding of Marcellus shale and natural gas drilling. It is far too complex a topic to fully understand all of the opportunities, the limitations, the impact, and any risks associated with it. So I encourage you that use tonight as an intro session, if you will, and continue to do research and read and learn. And understand that this is a very passionate topic, and you and your neighbor may not agree. Your neighbor may choose to lease their land, and what you're used to seeing out of your kitchen window is forests and trees. You might suddenly see a rig, and that may be a problem. Others may feel the benefit of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania being a global player in the energy industry is definitely a goal that we need to work towards, and Pennsylvania's political stance in U.S. politics. Those could be the drivers for other folks advocating on behalf of aggressive natural gas industry development in the Commonwealth. But whatever your position may be, as I said, you must exercise your judgment tonight in understanding that you're going to walk away with just a snippet of information. And you're best served by continuing to read and to research and to discuss and talk with the experts. And with that, I'm sure I used more of the time that allowed me in the 10 rules for being an effective moderator. So at this point, I'm just going to turn the program over to our speakers. And Wendy and Matt.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Enjoy the opportunity to get to speak. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. I'm a member, or my company is Exco Resources. We're a member of the Marcellus Shale Coalition, which is a group of companies that have kind of joined together to help educate the public, answer questions and that sort of thing on what is going on with the Marcellus Shale. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I'm a native, Washington County. I spent most of my time there in a very rural area. I used to go coal picking, so to speak, with my neighbors at the slag dumps so that everybody would have some coal for the winter time. And so I'm very familiar with a lot of the energy development that has gone on in Pennsylvania from the coal side and the steel mill industry as well, from being close to Pittsburgh. Then my family moved to Indiana County, so I finished high school there, and again in a very, very small rural area, Conemaugh Township to be exact, and I went to Salzburg High School. After that, I went to Indiana University of PA, and I got a bachelor's degree in geology. After that, I left. I got a master's degree at the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri, but I couldn't come back to Pennsylvania because there were no jobs. And so I spent my career up until just recently out in Texas and Oklahoma in the oil and natural gas industry. It wasn't certainly by design, but that's where I could find a job, and I really have enjoyed it. It's a very fascinating industry. It's very technical. And it does have a large impact with our nation as far as the energy industry and how we're moving forward. So, but recently with the Marcellus Shale discovery, I was able to come back to Pennsylvania and work here, grow up again, have my kids grow up here, and it's good to be home. It's a good place to be, and I'm really excited to bring a lot of former Pennsylvania residents back home again to join my company and work in this industry, and then also hire a lot of local people to participate in this industry. So with that, the Marcellus Shale Coalition, their commitment to Pennsylvania is the long-term development of the Marcellus Shale, and it is very vast, and it will take many, many years to develop. But everybody's very committed to doing that, and to do it very responsibly, and use the water resources that are here responsibly. We are always investigating advanced water treatment technologies. We are very interested in protecting the environment. We live here too. We employ lots of folks here. Currently, speak for my company, we do employ over 170 folks in Pennsylvania right now, all across Pennsylvania. So we do work very hard to resolve landowner, government, public concerns, and we see this as a big benefit to the future of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania does have a very long oil and gas well history. As many of you probably already know that the first oil well was drilled in Pennsylvania, the Drake well, over 150 years ago. And so there's been, we talked about this a little bit earlier, something over 300,000 oil and gas wells drilled in Pennsylvania, but there's 100,000 that have been producing. That's an awful lot of wells. It's been going on for a very long time. Fracking has been introduced in the 1940s and has been used very regularly since the 1950s. It's not a new practice. Anyway, you can see that there is this long history in Pennsylvania. This slide shows the extensive nature of where the Marcellus Shale can be found, from New York through a large portion of Pennsylvania down into West Virginia and somewhat into Ohio. So that shale layer is very broad, extensive. So it covers this large area, and so it's kind of hard to say that it's not going to produce the same in every area, as you can see. So there's lots of questions and lots of issues across it, and again, you just have to emphasize that every area is not going to be the same. Every well produces something different. So why the Marcellus Shale now when it's been there for 350 million years? Well, we've known about this shale as far as an industry for a very long time, but now it's very economically feasible to extract the natural gas from that layer. Horizontal drilling, while it's a new technology to Pennsylvania and West Virginia, New York, it's been around the industry for well more than 20 years now. So again, for those of us that have been in the industry for a long time, it isn't anything new. It's been used all over the world. And the Marcellus Shale, frankly, is very close to the Northeast Population Center that has heavy use of natural gas. And again, the energy cost trends point to natural gas as well. And then in the Marcellus Shale, there's estimates that there's more than 500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas in that shale formation, and that's quite a lot. So horizontal drilling, what is it? You can see on this diagram, there's a surface location at the top left there for you, and it's operation that, yes, we do have to have a drilling pad that may take up 5 acres, and but we can drill several wells from that pad and not disturb acreage elsewhere. So we drill down in the Marcellus Shale about a mile, and then we turn the drill bit and go sideways with it. And in that manner, we can then extract natural gas under properties and our leases. And we do what's called fracturing, which many of you have heard of, but it's complex, and it's to understand what exactly happens. We put several cases of drill string in to protect the water table. Again, we drill down, we put in another final string in. We perforate that final string of steel casing way down, very, very deep, where there is no fresh water. And when we run the fracking material down into the well, it goes out those perforations that we've created and into that rock to create fractures. That's what fracturing is. And then the natural gas there now has a pathway to get to the well bore, and then we can produce that natural gas. So where we are now, there has been a large amount of acreage that has been leased in the state. Again, most of these leases, and they go from anywhere from some 5 years to 10 years, and so there's a time clock ticking, excuse me, on those leases. So that just means we need to get to them and get that natural gas out. So because of that time clock that we're under, you're going to see an increased drilling activity, okay? And then when we get to the rig trends, this is where Matt will take over, but the rig trend does favor Pennsylvania for a number of reasons, but a lot of it has to do with the leases that we have, and a lot of them are brand new. Again, there's this time clock clicking on it, and if we don't get to it, it goes away. Our investment goes away, and so we want to make sure that we can act on that investment. So, for instance, Oklahoma, Texas, and such, where leasing has been done for long periods of time, they're already held by production. There isn't that time clock, and so you may not have drilling in those areas as active as you may have in Pennsylvania. That's just one reason. And so far, our early production reports on the Marcellus Shale in different areas have been favorable. Industry's excited. There's still a long way to go to understand exactly what we can produce from the shale, but that's something that we're all working very hard to get to those answers. So with that, Matt will take over.
Actually, I want to tell you guys, first of all, thank you everybody for giving us the opportunity to come here, and this dialogue is critically important as we move forward to 5 minutes, thank you, to cultivate the natural resource and bring more natural gas to Americans. But I do want to point out that over here, Wendy referenced the casing that we put into the well. And you can come up, you can touch this. I don't know if Brian maybe wants to step up and put it on the table to see what it is, but we have 3 layers that go in. The layer he's putting up now is the production casing, lines the entire well. And then we have other layers of casing here, and it's all together. So once we go through the surface casing, what you're seeing right there, the cement is pumped up. But I encourage you at some point to come up, not while I'm speaking, no, anytime afterward, and pick it up and just feel it, and so it gives you a better feel for it. So with that said, I better continue on. Pennsylvania has seen a lot of activity. However, the rest of the country has seen a decrease in drilling rigs. That started to even out a little bit. But what you'll notice about drilling is that it doesn't all happen at once. You don't have all of the rigs in one area at one time. I was in Bradford County with Brian, and there are 14 drilling rigs running there, and you still are somewhat hard-pressed to come up on one and find it if you're not looking for it. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you hear about the number of drilling rigs a certain area or a state has. Because the Marcellus Shale is so big, those rigs tend to be spread out a little bit. Want to talk a little bit about water usage and water management, and because there's a lot written, a lot talked about here, and I think everything has to be put into context and have some perspective. But there are strict water withdrawal regulations. There's what you call Q710 requirements, which is the lowest average 7-day flow that would occur with a frequency interval of once in 10 years that we abide by. SRBC and DRBC approvals. I'm sure if you're here tonight, you've heard those acronyms and understand the role they play in water for the natural gas industry. There's a significant water recycling effort undergoing by the industry. A year ago, you probably didn't hear too much about water recycling or water reuse. But it's very hard to take a snapshot of this industry in the Marcellus and say, here's how it is on January 20th, 2010, and here's how it's going to be a year from now, because things evolve and technology increases because there's an opportunity here and people recognize that. I do want to point out, just again, a little bit of perspective on the water use. Power, first of all, producing energy does take water, and there's a lot of water that is used. And you never want to minimize the use of a natural resource. But just to give you a perspective here, this is in millions of gallons per day. The power generation uses a lot of energy, 5.93 billion gallons per day. Industrial use is next, then public water systems, and at the very end, you can see at about 30 million gallons per day is Marcellus Shale drilling. So just want to make sure that everyone understands that it does take water. You don't want to minimize it, but a lot of things take a lot of water. And again, this kind of talks about you can't take just a look and say it's always going to be this way or there's nothing that's going to change. The treatment capacity right now is certainly adequate to meet the current needs, but there are new and advanced treatment plants proposed and needed for the future. And then you're also going to have, again, a combination of technologies that do arrive as this industry develops throughout the years. And you're seeing, you have the option of an injection well, which puts the any produced water back to where it was, deep under the surface. Crystallization, advanced oxidation, membrane filtration and development, all of those things are working. Another key issue, and I know I'm getting low on time, is of course hydraulic fracturing. And the water used for hydraulic fracturing is water mixed with sand and chemicals. And I do want to make sure that you guys can see the chemical list, because a lot has been written and talked about when it comes to the chemicals that are in use. And first of all, we brought some fact sheets tonight. You're more than welcome to grab them on your way out. I think they're on the tables outside, detailing what is used in your typical frac job. And this is on our website. It's on several different websites. You can go on and you can look at it. Important to understand that every chemical that is used in the hydraulic fracturing process is used for a reason. There's something that chemical is doing in there, whether it be the hydrochloric acid, which is dissolving the minerals and helping to initiate the cracks. You can find it in other household uses, and that's all broken down on here for you. Different things to stop bacteria from growing in the wellbore, to maintain the integrity of the well as that completion process is going on. So every chemical has a use, and it is designed to make sure that the well can be safely hydraulically fractured. And the hydraulic fracturing is the component that allows natural gas development to occur. And just this past week, the Secretary of Energy, Stephen Chu, talked about the natural gas finds across the country from deep shale gas. And he was quick to say that he thinks it's going to be done safely. It's done very deep underground, and that natural gas is going to continue to play a very key role for America moving forward because it is a clean burning fuel. Some local issues that we do want to work on, and we believe it is our duty as an industry and as individual companies that when we do go into a community, you need to work closely with that community on the issues that are going to affect people. And a lot of that is what we call road use agreements. I know as a company for Chesapeake, I can talk about what we had. Do I have 1 minute or am I done? I need to wrap it up. We try and work with every community to make sure that we are able to get some road use agreements, make sure there's an understanding with the community, the work we're going to do before and after. And I will just tell you that there are a lot of jobs. The Penn State study, 107,000 jobs in 2010, up to 174,000 in 2020. So that's it, and I'm sure there'll be some questions for the panel. So thank you very much for your time.
Matt and Wendy, thank you. I think I warned you in advance that tonight was going to be pretty heavy with information, but certainly you couldn't walk away knowing everything. I mean, just the science behind this alone is absolutely phenomenal. Next, Pam Fendrock, representing Penn Futures. Pam?
Hi, everyone. If this advances the way I hope it does, by the way, I won't necessarily talk to the slides, so if, like my husband, you like to tune me out at some point, just read the slides and you'll get information, so I give you options. As Terry mentioned, I work with Penn Future. I've been with Penn Future for about 2.5 years. Penn Future is about an almost 12-year-old organization that's headquartered in Harrisburg. We have offices in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Westchester, Doylestown, and our newest office is in Wilkes-Barre. When I started with Penn Future 2.5 years ago, I started as a part-time person. I was the first on-the-ground presence in northeastern Pennsylvania for Penn Future. And we started out of a spare bedroom in my house. We are now up to 2 full-time people in an office on Public Square in Wilkes-Barre, and my coworker Joy is sitting down here. So if you don't like what I'm saying, please don't take it out on her. Even though I'm newly on the ground and Joy's newly on the ground in northeastern Pennsylvania, our law staff has been working in northeastern Pennsylvania and doing pro bono work for almost as long as we've been in existence. There are some people in the audience who are familiar with our work. We've worked on stormwater runoff issues. We've worked to protect streams, and that's the kind of work we do. I am from Carbondale. I've been in and out of northeastern Pennsylvania for the better part of the last 25 years. Something keeps bringing me back. This is home. And when I came back and I had the opportunity to work with Penn Future, I jumped at it. I was intimidated by the work because it's so important and there's so much I don't know and I will never know, but it's important to protect this area. Penn Future believes the same thing, and that's why I love working with the organization. That being said, why Marcellus Shale and drilling in general? We've worked for years on air, water, mining, health, all sorts of issues, and we're kind of a mainstream organization. We're not a strict environmental organization by some definitions because we know that we have to protect our environment. We have to keep our environment clean in order to sustain ourselves, our environment, our economy. If we run down our resources and we have nothing left, then what are we going to do for jobs? We have to make the two work together. So we work for practical solutions that marry the two. Now, Marcellus drilling, as was mentioned earlier, drilling, mining has a long history in Pennsylvania. We in the anthracite region know better than most about that history. We essentially, literally and figuratively, fueled the Industrial Revolution that changed the world, the entire world. However, now we still have the scars of that. Most of the money has run out. Many of the companies are now defunct. But we have rivers that run with orange water. We have calm banks, slag heaps, they're called different things in different parts of the state, and there's no money, there's nothing to clean that up. Do we want to make the same mistakes again? I don't think we should. I think that if we didn't learn our lesson the first time, then shame on us if we do it again. That's not to say that we're against drilling or we shouldn't drill for gas. The point is we have to be smart about what we do. There are a lot of bad things that can come with drilling, and if it's not done responsibly. I mean, let's face it, no matter what we do, if we extract a resource from under the earth, there are going to be environmental impacts. And anyone who says that's not true is just not really facing the facts. The point is we have to get in front of it and we have to be smart about it. There are, as has been talked about, and I'm sure will be talked about some more, there are issues with the chemicals used in the fracking fluids. Frankly, though, when water supplies have been contaminated, when there have been issues, it's not so much from the water that's going under the ground, it's from chemical spills that happen during the process. It's happened because, for one reason or another, something has happened with the casing, and the casing leaks or cracks or that kind of thing. These are, in many cases, operational issues that can be fixed. So, there are other issues, however. When we think about drilling, it's not just about that water, and that's a big issue. How much water is used is an issue, how it's used, how we treat it. There are companies like Range Resources is now saying they are recycling 100% of the flowback water. That's the water that comes back after a well is fracked. That's what comes back. They're recycling 100%. Is what they're saying, and they are reusing it. So they say for one well that takes about 7,500 trucks off of the road, those trucks that don't have to take that water to some treatment plant. Because meanwhile, where do you treat that water? You can't take it to a local municipal plant. They are not set up to treat the kind of, not only chemicals, but the salt that comes back out of the earth when you take this water out. They're not set up to adequately treat it. So what do? You truck it somewhere. There's talk that some drillers in New York State are bringing it down into Pennsylvania for treatment. Because I was at a conference just a few months ago. Some drillers there are talking about their trucking their water down to the Chesapeake Bay region. Because if the water is still briny, still contains salt after you treat it, but you dump it into an area that's already salt water, as opposed to higher in Pennsylvania where you have fresh water, well, maybe there's not as much of an issue. However, there are already impacts with the Chesapeake Bay. Some of you have probably heard about it. We're trying to clean up our sewer systems and so on because we're feeding into the rivers that feed into the bay, and the bay is unhealthy. There are issues because warmer water is going into the bay. It's drawing more salt water into the bay and displacing the fresh water, and that's harming the ecosystem. So I raised the point, if we dump more salt water at the mouth of the bay, doesn't that compound that problem? See, all of these things that don't necessarily seem connected, when you really look at them, they start coming together, and they're connected. Now, there is good that can come from drilling in this state. There are people in many of the regions of this state where the drilling is really important and is really going on earnestly and will continue earnestly. People who are land rich but money poor. People who have been just trying to eke out a living for years, decades, and sometimes generations, who now are having people knock on their doors and say, we would like to give you thousands of dollars a month to lease your land. Now, if you're these people who are trying to eke out a living, are trying to be able to support a family and leave something to your family, can you blame people for wanting to take advantage of this? Can you honestly blame people? When people contact us and say, we've been approached by drillers and what do we do? I said, get your water tested. Get your water tested and make sure you have baseline studies. Make sure that you know if something does happen, and it always can, not because the natural gas industry is a bad industry and people are trying to do bad things, but because things happen. So protect yourselves if you are some of those people who have this opportunity. Now, these good things can happen. This can bring money to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which we need. We all know about the budget debacle that happened in Pennsylvania this year. We all know now that some state forest lands, however, are being leased to the industry. Good, bad, indifferent. Again, these are complex issues. But we have to work to make sure the people who are qualified to make the right decisions are making those decisions and are being consulted, and we're not just working out of greed. Tara, how much time do I have? I just want 6 minutes. Okay, thank you. Right now, we have about 690,000 acres of state forest lands that are available up for grabs for drilling. Just, I think it was last week or maybe a week before, it was announced that a bunch of lands were leased, contracts were signed, auction was held, $128 million was signed in lease negotiations. The Pennsylvania budget said that $60 million had to come from leases on Pennsylvania land. So now where's that other $62 or $68 million going? We're hoping it goes to DCNR. And the regulatory bodies and the organizations that will be impacted and need to do the work they have to do to preserve our forests. And even if you're not big on trees and you like to live in the city, know that the tourism industry in Pennsylvania, that includes tourism, people who come for fall foliage tours, people who fish, people who hunt, bring in billions of dollars every year to this state's economy. That's money that goes right into the general fund, goes to other places, and if we plow down our forests in a way that's not smart, then we are essentially affecting that, not only environment, but also that industry and that economy, that economic base. We have to be smart about it. There are other impacts from drilling. There are air quality issues. When wells are drilled, they have to be flared at some point. That gives off methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas. Methane, in some places, some landfills. Recently, there was a project announced locally where methane is trapped and it's burned and it's used to produce electricity. There are things that can be done, but we have to watch out for all the side effects of things too, and we have to be aware of them. There is federal legislation that is currently being looked at. Senator Casey is one of the people who proposed this bill. It's called the FRAC Act. And essentially, if the FRAC Act is passed, it would make it a law, a federal law, for all drillers to have to expose the chemicals they're using. We just saw up here, we have the list. DEP has a list of chemicals available on its website. You can link to it from the Penn Future website, but we don't have the concentrations there. There is federal legislation that Senator Casey is trying to help get through that we are supporting, and this would also change the Safe Drinking Water Act, which was changed in 2005, 2006, where hydrofracturing was excluded from the Safe Drinking Water Act. We're trying to get that put back in. So there are things going on. Penn Future is very supportive of a severance tax. Chesapeake Energy, I hope you don't mind if I quote the CEO of Chesapeake, we quote all the time, who has said, "We gladly pay a severance tax in every state except New York and Pennsylvania." And you know, it's essentially, we're giving a deal. As was mentioned earlier, we are close to the largest natural gas market in the United States, which is the northeast part of the United States. The transportation cost to get gas to market is a large part of the cost of natural gas. When you drill in Pennsylvania, in some ways that cuts much of that transportation cost because you don't have to pipe it up from Texas or Oklahoma or Arkansas or other places where these fields are being developed. So the severance tax we would like to see passed would in fact put some money into the general fund of Pennsylvania, but it would also send money back to local municipalities that are being directly affected by drilling. For example, when you have all of a sudden this influx of workers, some long-term, some temporary workers who are skilled coming from other areas, now all of a sudden you have more people, but what about your police department? What about the fire department? What about the school systems? What about the housing that's affected by all of a sudden, especially when you're in these rural areas where you don't necessarily have those kinds of services? Well, who's going to pay to hire more people in a fire department, in a police department? This is where we want a chunk of this severance tax to go, to those local municipalities, to the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, to the Department of Environmental Protection, because as of January 2009, they only have 15 inspectors for 60,000 active wells. We need to do more. We need to stay in front of it. Again, I'm not saying the industry is a bad thing. In many ways, it could be a wonderful thing for Pennsylvania and for the nation. Thank you. But we have to be smart. We can't sacrifice our environment for the sake of money. Municipalities also have to plan ahead. If all of a sudden you have all this money coming into these municipalities and we say, whoa, we could do all sorts of things we never did before. Remember that sooner or later, a finite resource will run out. So I always caution municipalities, plan for that. Plan and put money aside into a fund that will help you when that resource runs out. We're walking a tightrope. We're walking a tightrope, and we could go in either direction, and we could fall off one way or the other. What I encourage you and everyone who cares about this issue to do, contact your legislators. I have postcards with me that you could sign, and I'll take and deliver right to your legislators to let them know. Maybe this is okay, maybe it's not okay, maybe some of you don't want it at all. But if we're going to do it, please be smart about it. Thank you for your time, and thank you for caring about Pennsylvania. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Pam. And now we uncover a new facet, finding a balance between the economy and the environment, and using science and technology to mitigate any of the environmental impacts that could occur during operational phases of drilling. And then Pam also introduced another topic, fiscal policy and taxation. Not only implementing it, but then how are those resources used, and how can they be reused to support the quality of life and the standard of living and reinvesting in our communities as we move forward. There's so much to talk about on this topic. At this point, I'd like to bring up Jennifer Means from the Department of Environmental Protection.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about the technical difficulty. I was running a little late this evening. I found out that my last eye doctor appointment must not have been very successful because I can't read street signs at night to save my life. So, running a little late, but anyway. I'm with the Department of Environmental Protection. I'm the program manager for the Eastern Oil and Gas Region, which is pretty newly formed within the last year. This map kind of shows what our area is. Prior to last spring, the state of Pennsylvania was split into two oil and gas regions, the northern region and the southern region. And both of those areas were handled out of two offices in the western part of the state, in Meadville and Pittsburgh. About a year and a half ago, with all of the increase in Marcellus activity over in this eastern part of the state where we traditionally don't have a lot of drilling, there was an effort made, at high levels in the department and the governor's office to actually open a new office and hire 30-some new people to deal with this increase in Marcellus activity. 17 of those positions came to our office in the eastern region based out of Williamsport. Some of the other positions went to the northwest and southwest offices to deal with increased permitting activity. I'll explain a little bit more about that. Our eastern region covers 45 counties. There's active drilling going on in about 22 counties, either new or the older shallow drilling activity. 6 counties also have gas storage fields, which people don't think about a lot. Right now, we've actually increased staff. We originally were allotted those 17 positions. In the last couple of months, we've been given 6 more positions. We now have a total of 23. 20 of those are filled, and we're still trying to fill 3 of the vacancies. For a little bit more history here, we started evolving into this program last February. I came into the oil and gas program. I've been with the department about 17 years in 5 different programs. Mostly over the last 10 years, I've been working in watershed-based programs, water quality programs, focusing on watershed restoration efforts. And I guess I'd have to add on to our last speaker here. I grew up in Schuylkill County in Pennsylvania, so grew up very much in the middle of the anthracite mining area, seeing the remnants of that activity all through my, when I was growing up. And although I've worked in the watershed program for the last 10 years or so, sometimes working on abandoned mine drainage projects and other watershed type efforts. And then about a year and a half ago got involved initially in the Marcellus activity through my work in the watershed program when we started looking at the water usage that was discussed. And it kind of evolved from there. I have my presentation set up to talk a little bit about the potential impacts between gas drilling and our water resources and some of the requirements we have in place to deal with those potential impacts and what our role is in the eastern region of Pennsylvania. So just highlighting them here, stormwater, stream and wetland encroachments, the water use, drilling, fluids management, and wastewater disposal. And a lot of these have already been described quite a bit, so I won't need to go into all of them in too much detail. Stormwater. I listed as construction and post-construction. Basically, when it rains, there's precipitation, water hits the ground and runs off, you have stormwater issues. During construction, when there's earth disturbance going on, they're out there moving earth to build these sites. You can have erosion and sedimentation occurring where the soil is basically washed from the ground into streams or wetlands. That sedimentation in the stream causes a potential impact to aquatic life. Also, stormwater conveyance facilities like culvert pipes and bridges can get clogged up, so you have stormwater problems. In order to deal with that, what these operators are required to do is at the minimum have an erosion and sediment control plan or E&S plan on site and implement it. So those are best management practices to keep that sediment from leaving the site and entering waters of the Commonwealth. If they're disturbing 5 acres or more, they also actually need a permit from us, and that's called the ESCGP or Erosion Sediment Control General Permit 1. So that's how we deal with that issue. And of course, our inspectors who go out on these sites are looking to see that those plans are there and are implemented. The post-construction stormwater runoff is as you increase impervious area anywhere, whether it's in the city or from development, sprawl with pavement or compacting the earth, then you can increase that just general stormwater runoff after the site has already been constructed. So, when you're dealing with some of the smaller sites from the drilling that we're used to in Pennsylvania, that might not be a very large impact. But when you're dealing with sites that are about 5 acres in size on average, then you're going to have more of that, especially if there are a lot of them. And I worked a lot in the northern tier, north central Pennsylvania, and I know we were very subject to flashy, storms, a lot of flash floods and that sort of thing. So that's a concern, and we want to do what we can to prevent that. So as part of their permit, their erosion sediment control permit from us, they also need to address post-construction stormwater and explain how they're going to deal with those issues so there's not increased stormwater runoff. Stream and wetland encroachments. When they're building these sites, you need to cross streams and wetlands, usually with access roads, that sort of thing, to get up to where they're going to build the site. Occasionally, the well pad itself might be close to a wetland, but actually there's a distance of 100 feet that they have to remain from any wetland or stream. So that should not be happening in most cases. But they will have to cross them sometimes. Also, when they're putting in these pipelines, the large gathering line projects, those cross streams and wetlands. So in order to mitigate any potential negative effect there, they do need to get a permit from the department for those activities. We call them, it's our Chapter 105 permit. There's general permits and joint permits, which are actually more detailed and a lengthier review, depending on the amount of impacts they will have. Water use, I think that's already been touched on quite a bit from when I came in anyway. The hydraulic fracturing does use quite a bit of water. I'm going to say give or take 5 million. The industry folks may have had a better number on that. So there's potential impacts of water withdrawals, to surface and groundwater. So we require, the DEP requires a water management plan to be submitted by every operator for Marcellus wells, where they need to explain to us where they're going to get their water and show us all the calculations that shows that it's not going to create a negative impact in that water source. If in the Susquehanna River Basin, they always need SRBC approval prior to us being able to approve their water management plan. So we kind of do a bit of a joint review there. SRBC does a very thorough job on those reviews, and the same would go with the Delaware River Basin Commission. We're just starting to get involved with some activities with DRBC. Drilling itself, I heard this mentioned also with Pat, previous speaker. This is actually where there is a potential to have impacts to water supplies. As she said, everybody's concerned about the fracking, hydraulic fracturing. Our experience so far has been, I'm not going to say that's impossible, but that is a lot less likely to cause an impact to somebody's water supply, because that fracking is going on, again, a mile or so under the ground, whereas most of your fresh water supply, those of you who are on private wells, might be, in the first couple hundred feet. Maybe down to 600 feet or something like that. So there's a big distance and a lot of rock for that to go through. On the other hand, when you're actually drilling the well and you're going through that fresh water supply a couple hundred feet underground, and the drill bit can actually come into contact with the water, that's where you have the opportunity to have some potential impacts to nearby water supplies. A lot of times those are temporary and clear up, but we do investigate a lot of those types of complaints, and if there are impacts, then in most cases the well operator, if we can prove that, or if they're within our presumed liability distance, the operator would have to replace that water supply. Let's see. Yeah, our role in that is complaint investigations, inspections, and compliance and enforcement. I mentioned earlier about the two regions in Meadville and Pittsburgh. At this point, since our office is very new, less than a year old, those two regions still actually issue the drilling permits themselves. So we're responsible in Williamsport in the eastern region for looking at a lot of the surface permitting activities, like those E&S permits and the stream and wetland permits, and also for all of the compliance and oversight. But those two offices still right now have the staff to deal with issuing the drilling permits. So they're evaluating some of those issues as they're reviewing those permits. Fluids management. This has become the thing that we actually spend probably most of our time on, and I don't think that we necessarily expected that going into this program. because I think of these larger sites and the amount of water it takes, and then the amount of other chemicals it takes to drill and frack these wells, you've got a lot of things stored on site at different times, and that creates a potential for spills. Yeah, as I said, when the fracking itself is occurring, this material is very dilute, so maybe not as much of an issue. But when it's being stored on site in different areas, you know, in concentrated form, then you have potential. So we've actually, you know, my staff personally spend a lot of time responding to spills that are reported and kind of following up on those, making sure that they're properly cleaned up. To be fair, most of I don't want to sound alarmist, because there's only been a couple out of the many that have been reported that have actually reached a waterway or something like that. Most of them are on the well pad or pretty near the well pad, are contained and are cleaned up. But it still takes a lot of our staff time to follow through on that, you know, make sure that samples are collected, to document that it's been cleaned up and that sort of thing, make sure it's contained and there are no impacts getting off into surface waters or water, you know, nearby water supplies. So that's where we spend actually a lot of our time. To address this, the companies are to have a PPC plan, Preparedness Prevention Contingency Plan, which addresses how they're going to deal with storage of these chemicals and what they will do in case of some sort of incident. And they are required to notify us of spills, in which case, you know, we follow up. We also get calls by complaints or sometimes find things when we're doing routine inspections. And there are certain standards that they have to clean up to when the spill does occur. Wastewater disposal. So this may have been touched on earlier too. The fracking itself, then some of that 20-30% of that fluid comes back out of the hole, has to be disposed of. If it's illegally or improperly disposed of, it could have potential impacts to surface and groundwater. So they're required to identify in their control and disposal part of their PPC plan where they're going to get rid of their frac flowback fluid and their other wastewater. This is considered a residual waste, so it's managed according to those regulations. Our waste management program in the department primarily has the lead on receiving these. They have to submit something called a Form U and a Form 26R to report on the disposal of those materials. And again, and as also touched on, reuse is becoming something we're hearing more and more of, that a lot of companies are reusing this frac flow back from one well to the next, taking it to the next site and using it over again. And then they also don't need as much fresh water, so that's a good thing. Other issues that we're seeing, looking at, well, not that we're seeing, but at least potential things, gas migration cases that you folks may have heard of. There have not been as many of those in the time I've been with this program. In the last year, 2 significant ones that I'm aware of in our eastern region. Situation in Dimmick, which many of you may have heard of, and also one in Lycoming County, where there was a gas leak at a well that was actually not a Marcellus well, but an Oriskany well in Lycoming County. So those have happened. They do seem to be rare, which is a good thing, but also a bit scary. So I think any effort that we can take on the departments and to try and prevent those types of things from happening, certainly important. Other things, you know, potential cumulative impacts of all this activity, deforestation, stormwater impacts. When you're looking at all these well pad sites that we might have over the next 20 years, what will those total impacts be? And I don't know the answer to that. Those are things we're kind of questioning, and they're partially at least out of the realm of our regulatory purview. There are some draft regulatory changes that the department is working on to address these 4 main issues: protection and replacement of water supplies, new casing and cementing standards, pressure testing, and stray gas response. Finally, I am wrapping up here. Just to look at a comparison over the last 3 years for permits issued. This is across the state. So you can see we went from 71 Marcellus permits 3 years ago to almost 2,000 last year. In our eastern region, so there were 1,984 Marcellus permits issued in the last year. 1,200 of those were in the eastern region. So we do have the brunt of Marcellus activity over here. Challenges that we're facing, staffing, again, like I said, it's fantastic that we're getting more staff. I'm optimistic that we may get more staff yet to continue to grow with this program. But it does take a while to get people on board, to go through that hiring process and to get people up and trained. So we're going through that. And just the volume and rate of activity. I think that this Marcellus activity is kind of taken off a lot faster than people anticipated. And technology, just trying to have the technology, when you're talking about things like wastewater treatment, catch up in a way that is cost effective. That's it.
Jennifer, thank you. And Jennifer brings new experience to the table and introducing another concept for thought and consumption, and that's regulatory policy in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as it deals with the permitting process, the oversight process, the planning that companies must do, as well as the cleanup that would need to be done in the event of any type of accidents. It seems so far that DEP has their hands full and is working aggressively to address future concerns associated with the drilling. So maybe we could talk about that during the discussion period. Now I'd like to introduce Pat Carollo. Pat is here representing the Damascus Citizens Organization and is the co-founder of that group.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll hook everything up. Just a moment here to hook up some of this gear. And I'll just turn the lights down a bit. Well, thank you for your time this evening and for your consideration. The Damascus Citizens.org website yesterday got 50,000 hits. DamascusCitizens.org. Please remember that, because I helped Adobe build the PDF technology. So we're leveraging these many technologies to just get out as much information as rapidly as we can. Because for all intents and purposes, I believe very strongly that we are really in so many ways asking for a lot of difficulty with these scenarios. Let me say we wouldn't be here this evening if not for our addiction to fossil fuels. We are addicted to fossil fuels. Now, it's not only that addiction, one has to ask, why are we addicted? Well, lots of reasons, but I don't know if you noticed there's a beautiful train station here in town. No trains coming to the station. So we're in our automobiles, because we actually have one choice, automobiles. So we're addicted. There's lots of reasons why we're addicted, but we are addicted. So step one, we have to get a sense of that addiction. What an addict does is deny, obfuscate, lie, cheat, steal, do anything they have to. In this case, in 2005, one industry was given exemptions to every single federal law. One industry. The gas and oil industry. And now we're wrestling with the ramifications of that. One ramification, for example, is the small town, you may have heard about it, small town of Pittsburgh. Well, Pittsburgh lost its municipal drinking water supply. 385,000 citizens were told to drink bottled water. So really what it is I want to point out is that these issues really are global issues. They're national issues. This is a national issue. We're doing this because we're told, and by the way, I don't have a television. How many people have seen, just right off the bat, I don't know, that's why I'm asking. How many people have seen advertisements by the gas and oil industry here in Pennsylvania? How many people have seen ads on TV? Everybody. So there's a huge national effort. We are told, this is patriotic, we are told we will be using less foreign oil. I believe that the challenge really is, why is it that we're in this fix? Why are we addicted? So shale drilling is also a regional issue. Shale drilling is a local issue. Shale drilling is even really a personal issue. And for me, it's a profound personal issue. Because to me, I'm always in the river. Above my head right now are 2 or 3 eagles. Those eagles really were brought back from total destruction because of this chemical influx into their environment. We're talking here thousands of gas wells with secret toxic chemicals being injected into the ground. We may see lists. Those lists may not be the chemicals that are used. So I'm trying to broaden this out. I don't want to really talk about facts, figures. The lawyers will take care of that when the time comes. The health experts and our technical experts will take care of that when the time comes. But make no mistake, what we're fighting to protect is a public treasure, a sublime place. This is please bear with this 1-minute video, but I show this to you not to look at the turtle on the rock. This is Philadelphia drinking water passing by me. This bubbles up out of the ground where I live, and it does so here also, for those of you who have a well and need to drink the water out of the well. So this is Philadelphia's drinking water. This is Camden's drinking water. This is the drinking water that recharges half of New Jersey's aquifer. We have this data, and it will be presented when appropriate. So again, shale drilling is a global issue. Our addiction to fossil fuel is a global issue. Now, all of you who have seen these promos and these PR and what I like to say, which is why I don't have a television. 99% of America has televisions. I don't have a television. Why? Because I actually want to be able to think for myself. I like to call it propaganda. Why is it that we know that shale gas is our bridge to the future? Why do we know that? We all know that, right? Shale gas is our bridge to the future. But what good is getting to a future when you've destroyed the water? Water is our bridge to the future. There are so many global issues here. I can't even, my wife even caught a misspelling. It doesn't matter, I'll use this screen. Here in the nation, the one that really gets me upset is actually on this screen. The one that really gets me upset is the record slush that we're all having to deal with now. Because it doesn't snow anymore. It thunder snows every now and then. It rains, it snows. It's all slush. It's not right. You know, the planet will blow us off like we never existed. We are ruining our environment with this kind of crazy, runaway, extractive processes. Shale drilling is a regional issue. This is a little chunk of Allegheny State Forest. Fundamentally, it's destroyed. The deforestation, now if you go to, again, DamascusCitizens.org, you'll hit the button up top. It says photos. I think yesterday 10,000 photos were downloaded yesterday of these cumulative impact. There's no way. And if, you know what I like to notice also is how this. If you ever taken bark off a tree, you'll notice what the bacteria does on the back of the tree bark. This is almost has that kind of pattern. We're ruining our environment. The Earth's going to blow us off like we never existed. So I'm really trying to broaden this issue out. It's not about politics. It's not about fracking. It's not about anything. It's about what it is we're up to. You know, New York City did something no one else has done. They actually studied this. Because people like me 2 years ago were called demagogues, obstructionists, weirdos. But all I had to hear was 3 words in 1 sentence: Halliburton, watershed, and exemptions. I just needed to hear that in 1 sentence about 2 years ago. And I said, what are you talking? Somebody was telling me this. And I said, what do you, oh, they're exempt from everything. Oh, yeah, right. Oh. And they're using poisons, injecting millions of gallons, right? And they leased the land already. They already control 35% of Hancock. I'm saying, this is a bad dream. So our addiction is a regional issue, so much so that New York City did an 11-month study. They call this practice at the scale of deployment generally used by industry. They call it catastrophic. And there's no like less catastrophic or more catastrophic. They're calling it catastrophic circumstances. And this is New York City. So now, and it's funny, over this issue, you can see I'm very I work 24 hours a day on this thing. We're fighting for our lives. Again, one industry exempt from every law, and the PADEP staff is struggling so hard, and their budget was cut by 40% in the last 2 years? You don't know?
I don't have that number.
Okay, 40, 30? Someone know? Okay. So the states can't handle this, and I'll show you why. Here in the watershed, there was a well drilled. And of course, they did everything they could, Chesapeake did everything they could to not have to deal with any regulation. As a matter of fact, Chesapeake is on record saying they would rather not deal with public hearings because they don't have to, wherever it is they go. They're exempt from everything. So I went up in an airplane twice, and I hate those tiny little airplanes, scared the heck out of me. And well, there on the 25th of August, we saw this. Now you have to see the scale here. Look at the size of the earth-moving equipment there at top. So this is contaminated runoff. And what I particularly like about it is I went up in the plane, we put it on our website, and then of course it was announced that the Robeson well is contaminated. Guess who's doing the investigation? Chesapeake. Now, what you'll see here in the right picture, I mean, all of this is, we have the very best lawyers, the very best health experts, and this is going to stop right here in our beloved watershed, and hopefully we're working with people all over the country, all over the state. They're helping us, we're helping them. Here you'll see the surface of the 4.8-acre drilling pad. Why is it 4.8? Because they have to get a permit to do a 5-acre drilling pad, so they're making 4.8. So they're literally removing the entire surface. There's the evidence. They're removing the evidence from the site. Several days later, this entire mound, some 17 feet high, just disappeared. Where did it go? Well, the Scranton Times, so you don't have to believe me, Scranton Times did the investigation, and I read about what it is that's really happening here. What's happening here is that the site's contaminated with barium, and once again, Chesapeake is doing the investigation. Now, going south in the watershed is a little town called Philadelphia. Temple University, hundreds of people in Philadelphia now are beginning to rally. New York City is calling for a total prohibition. So much so that the Chesapeake CEO said, oh, we won't touch that. Well, it certainly makes sense because New York City wins every fight they've ever fought, but nothing is in writing. There are 37 other companies. The New York City watershed has now a catastrophic risk that it's facing, and it's the people's primary asset. And shale drilling is definitely a local issue. Look at this image. Now imagine this is eagle habitat. There are now hundreds of eagles here at this location, and that's what it will look like with the sort of deployment build-out that we can expect. This is before, this is what it looks like now, and this is what it's going to look like. Now, imagine being close up there, and imagine all that bubbling up out of the ground, running down the hills and out into the river, down into New York City and in Philadelphia. Now I'm going to let other people talk, and I'm just going to close my pie hole, James. We got a letter last week to our website. If you get a chance to go to our website, go down and you'll see, or youtube.com/gasdrillingtruth. If you get a chance, go to Gas Drilling Truth on YouTube, and you'll see Mrs. Stimsky, I'm saying her name right, but we got a letter from her son, and this is what he had to say. Yeah, okay, that's just about what I need.
I live in Hickory, Pennsylvania. Your camera crew came to my house and interviewed my mother, Virginia Smitsky, and myself. Just to update what is going on here, we had our water sent to an independent lab for testing. The amount of toxic chemicals were off the chart. We had the Department of Environmental Protection come to the house to take a sample of the water months ago, and we waited and waited for their report. We're still waiting. We still have no report back from them. My landlord called the DEP, and they said it was safe to drink. The day they took the water sample, I took a picture of our water. You won't believe it. Brown, oily water flows through our pipes. DEP took 3 vials of this water for testing. The independent lab told us not to drink the water, not to use it for cooking, and not to use it for bathing. Too many people have their pockets padded, though. What are we to do? We take quick, lukewarm showers. We do not drink the stuff and don't use it for cooking. We buy a lot of bottled water. Here is a picture of the brown water. It's not always this brown, but it's always full of toxins. It's strange how people are so scared of the swine flu. But when you talk about how the gas drillers are poisoning our water, people think you're crazy. Or they get mad because they think they can get rich off the deal the gas company is promising. The money is more important to them than their health. Finally, but maybe too late for us, people's eyes are starting to open and see the truth. Thank you for keeping up the fight. I know I will. The future of our nation's health depends on it.
And there's just one small additional detail that I'll close with. In the state of Pennsylvania, people have a constitutional right. This is one thing that the Cheney think tank overlooked when they put their scheme together in 2001 in their secret meeting with industry. The people in Pennsylvania in 1971, crazy time, wasn't it, 1971? The people of Pennsylvania in 1971 got a new right. And here, I invite you please to read that right. The people in Pennsylvania have a right to clean air and pure water. Now, I want to ask you, so I'll leave you with a question. No information, just a bunch of disconnected, big picture items here, I hope. But is this young man's mother, is she being afforded her constitutional rights? Are her constitutional rights being trampled on if she's got to deal with this? People in the state of Pennsylvania have a constitutional right to pure water. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you. That's the thing, the lights. You can bring those back up.
Just like that?
Yeah. Did it all. Great.
Thank you. Pat, thank you very much. And Pat's discussion tonight touches on many issues. One, the fact that gas extraction, fracking, natural gas drilling is a local, a regional, a statewide, a national, and a global topic of discussion for many reasons. He brings up another concept which I'm not sure we're prepared to handle tonight, and that's consumption, and how that affects our daily lives and what in the long term consumption does in general to the planet and what we should and should not be doing. And then quality of life issues, that's the bottom line. Pat talked about water and air quality, and those are part of our overall quality of life issues that affect how we live every day, including our standard of living. The one theme, and we covered several tonight, and the science and technology And the geology behind this is extensive. And as I said, I don't think we could walk away with all the answers, but perhaps some information to lead us on the continued path toward enlightenment, if you will. But the one thing that keeps coming out is issues regarding the environment, whether it be water, whether it would be air quality, how to prepare for incidences and things like that. And we heard from Matt and Wendy, who talked about the desire for their companies to proceed in a responsible and safe manner. Pam brought up the topic that there were some air quality tests in Canada, was it? And methane was released. I continued to play with Google this week for a number of reasons regarding this event and other research, and found that Texas does air quality tests on a regular basis, and their air quality tests are coming up negative, clean, safe, no significant levels of toxins. So,
That's not true. That's one test.
but they're running tests on a regular basis, and they're testing for chemicals. Okay. Part of the discussion then, as we look at this tonight, is in light of the fact that natural gas drilling is not essentially new, and fracking is not essentially new, and it's not new to Pennsylvania, it's becoming more of a newer technology or a visible technology to deal with energy issues in our state and our country. So how do we proceed then with regard to ensuring that our environment stays protected? It seems.
Can I respond to that? And in doing so, respond to this comment that's been made here many times. Probably just about every speaker said this. Is this mic on? Well, don't need it. Okay. While hydraulic fracturing and drilling, I mean, while this may not be new, what's being done now is brand new. What's being done now has only been done for 4 years. What's being done now is, and I'm not even religious, but there's only word to describe it. What's being done now is unholy. So what's being done now has only been done for 4 years, since the 2005 exemptions. The degree to which the practices are the result of the exemptions. That's my position, and I'm sure we'll hear others, but I've heard this several times.
It's my understanding that drilling has been going on in other states for 10 to 12 years.
This form of hydraulic
20
fracturing.
years in the Barnett Shale, this has been going on. This is not new, not at all, sir.
So the practices preceded the exemptions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
since the exceptions, there is zero liability at the federal level. Well, why else would you need the exemptions? Why else? Now, by the way, my brother is now involved in this on the other side. It's almost.
Pennsylvania's clean stream law is much tougher than the federal law.
Okay.
Let's go back to the discussion about Texas first. Texas has been doing this, you said, for 20 years. Okay. Texas has, well, we can't say for sure has handled this well as a state in terms of policy or not, but obviously they've had some successes. We can learn from their successes. We can learn from their failures. What is Texas doing that we in Pennsylvania should be doing? Can you identify any types of regulatory policy or any environmental safeguards on the differences between the two states? I mean, I would assume if you're talking about safe and responsible drilling here, you're obviously doing that in other states.
I think it was just that the reference to Texas is probably just where the technology was born, due to probably the proximity of the operators at the time to the discovery of the Barnett Shale, for their ability to understand how hydraulic fracturing can stimulate more of the shale. I think that, more than anything else, is probably what led to that discovery.
One thing that I can applaud Pennsylvania DEP for is they're on our sites every week inspecting. there was a little difference in the number of inspectors, but DEP has been vastly hiring as far as, or moving people over into the inspection and getting them out into the field to check on us. And, you know, the industry is inviting them out to our sites to come check to see that we're following all the rules and regulations that we're supposed to be. Instead of, you know, filling out a lot of paperwork in the office where those items aren't out on our sites. They do come out on our sites every week. They're on our locations. Matt, you were saying that they're on your locations every week as well. Yes?
How many locations do we have in the state? Was it 600,000? 350,000, and we have 16 inspectors, and they're there every week?
They're not,
I find that hard.
There's not active drilling.
there are not 16 inspectors for the entire state.
No.
Those may have been, I think I heard the number 17, which I think there was some confusion there because, like I said, when our program started a year ago, we were giving 17 positions for the eastern region. So there's definitely more than, I don't know what the total number of inspectors is for the state,
Under
but
50, over 50?
probably around that. Both of the western programs, the Meadville oil and gas program and the one in Pittsburgh, which have been around longer, have around 50 people total on each. That includes permit reviewers and inspectors, and like I said, ours is kind of growing, so.
And it's
Referring
on
to where we're
active
drilling,
sites.
Active sites. There have been more than 300,000 wells drilled since the beginning of the industry in Pennsylvania. We were talking about inspectors coming out to the sites where we are working.
Okay.
While they're active, once the well's producing and the site's reclaimed, inspectors don't come out
Oh,
every
wait,
week.
wait. Once the well's producing, you don't see the need for inspectors, is that what you're saying?
Not at all. I didn't say that. I said the inspectors don't come out as often. They still come on out.
Yes, we're going to have the Q&A shortly. You were all given index cards. If you have not completed an index card, please do so and hold it up, and someone from the league will walk around and collect them. We're going to try and have some discussion now with just the panelists. They weren't given a lot of time in light of the fact that we're doing a short intro event here. So we wanted to give them time to emphasize some of the points in their discussion.
One point about Texas, if I could make a very brief point. Texas actually is, I think, a good model. Texas is turning into a desert. So much water is being drawn out of the hydraulic cycle that last month there was snow in Texas. Now that just causes the problem to be even worse because the snow evaporates and it never makes it into the water cycle. So Texas, I think, is a good model. It's turning into a desert.
Pam, you brought up the concept of balancing economy and environment as a method going forward. And in part of that, you talked about a taxation policy to reinvest into the communities. Has Penn Futures taken that recommendation to the state legislature? Are there hearings? Where are we on that kind of a discussion?
Legislation is actually proposed to enact a severance tax in Pennsylvania, and Representative Bud George is one of the legislators who is pushing for a severance tax in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is one of the very few states that has extraction of natural resources that does not have a severance tax. There are states with severance taxes that extract natural resources. That there was a study done last year that said in 2008 most of those states didn't have the kind of budget cuts that the rest of the country experienced. Some of those people have low or no property taxes. I mean, there are all kinds of things that a severance tax can do. What we're looking to help support in Pennsylvania is the kind of tax that would not take all of this revenue that could potentially and will most likely come from Marcellus drilling, from drilling into the Marcellus in this Commonwealth, and put it into the Pennsylvania General Fund. What we're looking to do is push Representative George's legislation that would take a chunk of that revenue and then break it down to, as I mentioned, local municipalities who are going to have to deal with strains on their services, police, fire, et cetera, would go back to road repair is one of those things. I mean, some of the drillers do as part of their agreements, repair roads that get torn up by the increased truck traffic and so on. That happens. But we want to make sure the municipalities, for the long term, can deal with whatever the impacts are going to be. Also, to go to DCNR, to go to DEP. DEP increased the fee to apply for a permit for drilling. That was just about, it was in October, I think, that actually went into effect. The extra the money that now comes from that fee helped to fund these extra positions that are now being added. But we're just really at the beginning stages of this drilling. As it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, of course, we're going to need more staff and so on to keep up with that. So the theory is, if we have a severance tax, that, by the way the current legislation is written, wells have to get to a certain level of production before they would be taxed. So we're not talking about the people maybe in western Pennsylvania that have a small well that they use to power their own property and so on. You know, they wouldn't be adversely affected. We're talking about the big production. Now, there are some drilling companies that say Pennsylvania already has an exorbitant corporate tax. And how can we put a severance tax on top of that corporate tax? Many, not all, but many of the drilling companies doing business in Pennsylvania are organized in such a way, they're limited liability partnerships, so they're not paying that corporate tax. They're paying the personal income tax that we pay, we as individuals pay. And remember, there's also a break to the industry on transportation costs. We're already in the northeast part of the country where the major natural gas market is. It doesn't have to be piped from Texas or Arkansas or Oklahoma or other places. So there's money being saved there. So if we're talking about a 5 or 5.4 or 6 or whatever percent severance tax on production, then it's really shouldn't be that big a deal.
And the taxation policy is one fiscal or impact or policy statewide that we need to consider. But Jennifer, through DEP with the regulatory policy, you focused on PPC plans. But one of the things that happens before that is if a drilling company is going to drill, they have to apply to your agency for a permit, as well as you had mentioned through some of the watershed agencies. What is that permit process? What is involved in that, and what do the drilling companies have to do in that permit process?
There's actually a number of different permits that could potentially be involved. The main permit, I guess you would say, is the drilling permit that they need, and that's the permit that that we're still not handling out of our office in Williamsport. So they would go to Meadville or the Pittsburgh offices to review that drilling permit application. And then they also would likely need the permits for the surface activities. So the earth disturbance activities, the erosion sediment control permit, that would come to our office. So they would need to submit that to show that they're going to have practices in place to prevent any of that erosion sedimentation from leaving the site, getting to streams or wetlands. And again, permits if they want to cross streams or wetlands, if they need to put in culverts or fill to get to their site or for their pipeline activities, all of those activities, they need to submit a permit to our office to make sure there won't be any, negative impacts from those activities.
And if I could just interject a point here regarding this issue. About a year and a half ago, I was at a presentation by a PA DEP staff personnel, and he just casually just told the audience that, oh, well, yeah, someone asked, what's the permit process like, and is it is it the demand? He says, well, we generally issue 99.5% of the permit requests we get. So, with all due respect to our public official here, any organization that issues 99% of the permits are doing nothing more than just recording them and pushing them through. I think you all need to know that the PADEP said they issue about 99% of the permit requests that they receive. That, I think, is a relevant point.
I think if there are certain things that any industry has to do to gain a permit and you fulfill all the requirements of that process, at that point the permit is issued.
And I don't know where that number came from,
Yeah.
but I will say that many of the permits that come into our office, again, on the earth disturbance side or the stream and wetland encroachment side, I know we've sent back a number of those, to be honest, but a lot of them that come in may not be able to be approved as they are submitted. But there are maybe deficiencies noted, sent to the applicant, and they have to address those before we will issue the permit. So it's by no means just that it's submitted and approved as submitted.
Okay. One of the things that we didn't spend a lot of time on in any of your discussions, it was mentioned a little bit by Pam and a little bit between Matt and Wendy, is job creation and economic impact. And that type of investment in Pennsylvania. Perhaps you could give us some more information on the types of jobs created here, or perhaps using what's been done in other states, so that, because as I understand, there's everything from the scientific and the professional to the technical and the construction side, and that the industry cluster in and of itself is very significant.
I think the one thing about the industry that you have to understand is, and we've seen it across America in many industries, as technology increases, in any industry or in most places, what happens? The technology increases, the jobs do go away. And that is one thing about the natural gas industry that is different. As technology has increased, the job opportunities have increased as well, because you still need all of the people to do the work. You still need the top level scientists, you still need the geophysicists, you still need engineers to understand all of the issues that go with the wells. And then you also need what you could consider the traditional blue-collar jobs of working out in the field once the well is producing. Brian, I think each will probably have long-term 3 or 4 full-time jobs for about every 30 to 40 wells that we drill. And those are people who would then go out into the field, and they would be called either well tenders or superintendents at some point to go out and check and do the routine maintenance that goes along with having wells in production. And in Pennsylvania, what we've seen is at the start of the year, we had about 250 employees, and I'm talking about my company, Chesapeake in particular right now, about 250 employees in the state of Pennsylvania, and we're up almost to 900 in 1 year. So it's been a dramatic growth in job opportunities within the company, but then you also have to understand that many of the jobs are not with our company, they're with companies that do follow us along to do service work for the company, because we do need a lot of services when you are drilling a well. I think every rig supplies about 120 jobs, and if you look at the rig count, you can extrapolate what that means. We're having a big training component where all of those, what I call the well tenders, are being hired locally, and we're also training workers to work on the rigs that are local workers as well, because it is an expertise that you need and you may not have had locally. So the training aspect is a big part of it as well. I don't want to dominate the discussion, so I'll turn it back to-
I'll bring it up.
So you have a wide range of jobs that we've seen. I think the Penn State study showed that only about 7% of the jobs that would be created would actually be direct, what you would consider natural gas jobs. Everything else would be support, everything from truck drivers to every kind of industry you can imagine was represented in some way in that, but the drilling aspect of it was only about 7%.
If I could just add a little anecdotal information, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are sort of short-term and long-term projections in terms of employment. I mean, as you mentioned, Matt, you need an experienced workforce. So this is kind of new to us in Pennsylvania. We don't necessarily have a sort of in-house experienced workforce. So there is at least a point in time where people will come from out of state. But I understand Lackawanna College, for example, has started a Marcellus program to help train a workforce. I believe Penn State has started a program. So I think more Pennsylvania employment will evolve over time. And it won't be just people who are on the drill site or driving the trucks and so on. Remember that as there are more people coming to work, there are also those support industries like the restaurants in the towns where people are drilling and the hotels and so on, where people who work there, or there'll be more need for those kinds of things, and they'll occur. Now, on the kind of flip side of that, though, if I could just tell a short story, a coworker of mine who attended a conference on low-income housing about a month or so ago was telling a story that at that conference, someone related a story about a family in Towanda, not too far from here. Family had been leasing a house on a farmette for 30 years, raising a family, et cetera, paying $700 a month. The person who owns the farmette was approached by the gas industry and said, we have temporary workers who will be coming in sort of 3-week blocks. This house would house 4 workers at a time. So the man was offered, or the person who owned the property was offered $1,000 per week per worker. That's $4,000 per week is $16,000 per month. Now, that's great, and that person didn't even have to sign a lease. And all of a sudden, look at that, and how could that person say no? I mean, that's a tremendous boon for that person. But the family who had been living there for 30 years had to travel 52 miles to find the next affordable place that they could live. So imagine what that does to disrupt that family's life. Again, there are all sorts of trickle-down effects and things that will have to be dealt with, some good, some bad. It's a matter of how all of this is managed and meshed together.
Pam, thank you. I was just informed that this will complete the directed discussion portion of the program tonight, and now we're moving on to your question and answers that you submitted on the index cards. There are a number of questions, and some of them are in my hand, and I've been directed to go through as many as we can to get to the 9 o'clock end time of the event. The league is also requesting that the panelists respond to the questions that we don't get to, and the league will post the questions and the panelists' responses on their websites in the days following the events. So please be rest assured, if your question is not one that we get through this evening, that your questions and concerns and comments will be addressed post-event. What's the web address?
LWVLackawanna.org.
Okay.
And it's on the program.
Okay, it's on the program, on your purple program. If you didn't grab one, please do so at the registration table on your way out. The first question is, where are we concerning the FRAC Act? Can anybody give us maybe a current status of the FRAC Act? I know it's a Senator Casey bill. Has it formally?
Casey is sponsored in the Senate. There are a number of Congress people, but where we are is Exxon recently purchased XTO. Again, we're in the Marcellus play, so with players in the room, we're beginning to see the cards sort of be put on the table. The Exxon deal with XTO was a $41 billion deal, contingent, in my estimation, on the FRAC Act. If the FRAC Act is passed, ExxonMobil has the right to back out of a $41 billion deal. So you can see the chess pieces on the board being moved about.
Well,
So that's really sort of an overview of really the dynamic on the FRAC Act. Now, the FRAC Act is now being considered and being lobbied and being revised and being discussed.
And I know when, I believe it was in June in Washington, when the Groundwater Protection Council testified about hydraulic fracturing and stated on the record that there never had been an incident of contamination from hydraulic fracturing.
wait.
I'm sorry. That the issue is, will states continue to regulate, or will it be the
All
federal
right,
government?
please, let him respond to the question.
No, the mic's not working. So
Oh.
we'll just try to speak a little louder.
Okay. And we have a few other people in the audience I can probably hand off to too. And I don't know if Ken Kamarowski in the front row wants to add anything.
To the FRAC.
Yeah, we're answering now what's happened to the FRAC
I'm
Act.
not a FRAC Act expert.
All I'm saying is you're
Although I
going off
wish I
into
could be.
something else, and we don't.
No, I didn't
So-
know if you want, sir. I didn't know if you had anything he could add.
And
that would be
we'd like to
germane
actually
to
just have the
subject.
panel answer questions. Thank you,
Yeah.
James, so we can go on to the next unless someone else has something to say
I don't know if
about
somebody
the FRAC
has
Act.
anything that would be relevant to the discussion that would help us
Thank you.
educate ourselves. If they could add,
Great.
I think it would be a benefit for people to say something.
Okay, well, what we need to know at this point, thank you, that's enough on that question. What I'll do is I'll ask that this question be returned to the file, and then we could actually look at, if the bill has been introduced, what committees it has been heard in, if any, as of yet, and if there is an estimated timetable to move the bill forward. Okay.
Thank you.
This says it's a question for Jennifer or anyone. Will regulation changes be applied retroactively, or will existing permits be grandfathered? And it doesn't
Yeah.
specify the types of regulations, but maybe.
I'm not sure about that. Just to explain a little bit, in the regional office, our job is to basically implement the regulations that come down. I know a little bit about the proposed regulations. Some of what's being proposed actually would affect existing wells. I do know that much in terms of looking at some of the issues relating to the quality of the well casing and that sort of thing, but probably not all of it. Usually, not everything is
So
retroactive.
it's going to be based on what type of regulation
Right.
it is, whether it would be applicable to a new or existing
Right.
well site. Okay. The next question. In January 2009, there were 15 DEP inspectors for 60,000 drill sites. How many inspectors are there for how many drill sites as of January 2010? So, I guess.
I don't think the first number was right.
Okay.
So I can't, yeah,
Well,
not for the number of well sites. I didn't say that.
Well, what was the 60,000 referring to?
I didn't have any 60,000.
What is it now?
wells in production.
I don't know whose presentation that came from.
that was
in
yours.
mine.
So there's 60,000 active Marcellus Shale. No. Okay. So there could be, you're talking oil and gas. Okay, so
Going on her number there.
Vertical.
horizontal,
Yeah,
so a little bit beyond the topic that we're talking about tonight with regards to those active numbers. So maybe what we could do for this question is look at how many active drill sites there are as of January 2010, and then Jennifer, in the response to these, you could indicate how many people are employed at DEP and what are field workers. Okay. Question for Mr. Shepherd. I am the Northeast manager of the Carpenters Union and president of the Scranton Building Trades. Chesapeake and all of the other companies are bringing on hundreds of out-of-state workers who do not pay local taxes. When are you going to reach out to the local building trades for contractors to work on the pumping stations and water treatment plants and put local tax-paying citizens to work?
I know we've spent $100 million with Pennsylvania businesses this year. We have hired many local people. I think at one point recently, of the 18 contractors that we had working, 16 were local, 2 were out of state. I'm sorry. Of the 18 contractors
Here
we
we
had,
go.
16 were local, and 2 were from out of state that offered expertise that we didn't have here. And with all due respect, I'm going to ask Brian if there is an updated number, because Brian does see a lot of the on-the-ground work in Northeast Pennsylvania, and he can speak up really loud.
I think as of Monday was the last time I saw the list. We're utilizing about 20 different construction contractors.
Can you stand up and turn around
Sure.
so that we can hear you?
We were utilizing about 20 different local construction, 20 different construction contractors. I would say 19 of them which you would characterize as being local, and by that I mean northern tier to Scranton to the southern tier of New York. And of the one that I know that isn't local, they originally came up here from Texas. They brought some expertise with them, but this company itself has now hired largely local people, folks from Bradford County and Susquehanna County that is doing the work. So there's a lot of different ways you can split that, but largely we are using local contractors.
Okay, so
And-
as a member of the panel, I'd like to say that what we've heard now is from an actual worker saying, why isn't it that the industry isn't, the word he used was isn't. He didn't use the word 29 were, or 19 were local and 1 was from Texas. We have a question from someone in the room. Could I please see a show of hand and who made this question? This gentleman here. Would you like to, Are local workers being hired to the degree that seems appropriate to you?
Every license plate we're seeing are all from out of state.
Thank you very much, and this is what we see across the region and across the country.
I think
Well,
what you
you know,
see
Thank you
are,
very much for us being able to hear.
and I'd be
from,
happy to step outside and we can talk and I can get
from
your
a-
card and we'll do all that stuff because that's how good
Have,
commerce
opportunity
happens.
for some
Okay.
business to transpire.
Okay, well, and this is interesting, and we have to understand here that the drilling in the Commonwealth right now is in the infancy stages. So I think we need to take into perspective job creation, economic impact, the regulatory environment, and the fiscal also being in the infancy stages, and something that we have to work together and essentially connect as we continue to develop the industry with regard to all facets of policy development, community development, and economic development. And that's part of the quality of life, yes. Okay, this next question had to do with jobs and mirrored the first. And another question that was added on to this, sort of a part B, where it's talking about jobs created and filled with local people, and for how long? What is the life expectancy of a well?
Well, we've only drilled a few, so it's hard to say, but we would say that a Marcellus well would certainly produce for decades.
Okay, so we're talking long-term jobs then. Okay. Is there-
No, if I can interject, we're not talking long-term jobs. We're talking transient workers moving from drill site to drill site. Halliburton says on their own website that the various and sundry wells can be fracked up to 50 years. So a drilling company will come in and they'll refrack a well, pump millions of gallons of water and chemicals into the ground, and then move on to the next site. These are temporary jobs, they're transient jobs, and there are a number of studies that really demonstrate the fact that there will be almost no permanent jobs created from this endeavor. Now, of course, there's trickle down. You know, there'll be automobiles sold, there'll be houses built, there'll be lots of roads to repair,
And every
which we'll have to pay for, not industry.
the jobs that are created, there will be long-term jobs. There will be people who come in because it takes a few weeks to drill a well. So those people then, of course, are not going to be at the same location every time, but there will be long-term jobs. I'm looking at 3 people here from northern Pennsylvania who are working for us. I'm hoping it's long-term for them. And there are many different cases like that. Please.
Look, can I please make a request to the panel director? We would like to just hear from the panel at this point, not from past politicians who have gone from public service to industry.
Also,
I'd
there's,
like to-
excuse me, there's a point,
Who's participating?
no, excuse me, there's a point that we need to make here. With all due respect, we are videotaping this to air on public access television. We hope to air this to literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
thank you.
Only the dais is mic'd. So anytime that anybody speaks on the floor, on television, the viewers that we have there, they're not going to hear anything. It's important that everything come from here. And if our moderator wants to repeat a question from the floor, I'm sorry, from the audience, we can do that. But just keep in mind that we're taping this. We want many, many, many more people to see this other than what's in this room tonight. And we need for them to be able to hear it as well.
Well, thank
So,
you. But
please.
So we're asking for no speeches from the audience, and questions are welcome, and we'll make responses as best we can.
Well, right now, we're going to stick to the questions on the cards because they did come from the audience, and we recognize that questions and answers may generate even more questions, but for now, we're going to go with what we have here on the cards. Are there any safety regulations for people building facilities to support Marcellus Shale? Training requirements, i.e. Building for construction workers, and will there be any intermediate pumping stations built in northeastern Pennsylvania? Well, then there's a third part, and I could repeat these, but how many compression stations, pumping stations, and water treatment facilities will be built?
That's very tough to say as far as how many stations will be built. That's more of a pipeline company question. The big interstate pipelines, they're the ones that build those stations. And, you know, I saw in a brochure, you know, and I don't know if it was correct, but every 40 miles to every 100 miles, there might be a station. So I don't know if that's absolutely correct or not, but.
Okay, the other question had to do with training requirements for construction workers.
Yeah, absolutely, there are. There's certain ways if we're gonna construct a pad site. We have taken some local contractors they've never built a pad site, taken them out to Western Pennsylvania to show them what other contractors have done and to train them how to do it, and then brought them back here and they've built our site. So there's from the aspect of building the site, there's certainly OSHA requirements and all the things that we have to abide by that we do.
Okay. All right, this is another 4-part index card, so I'm just going to start with the first one, and we'll go down from there instead of reading you 3 questions at once. What are the arguments for and against higher severance taxes on production and fair market value for leases on state lands?
Can you repeat that one more time, just so
Sure.
I get a little clearer
Before we-
picture of what the
before we actually
question's
have you
trying to
repeat it,
address?
I can actually respond to a portion of that. And thus far, I believe we haven't discussed the constitutional right that we all have to clean water, and we haven't actually heard any response from industry and from PADEP with regard to this just pleading letter that we've gotten. And by the way, we've gotten hundreds of these communications from the community. But also in the PA state constitution, there is a clause, the very next sentence in Article 1, Section 27 says that the public lands are to be protected for generations to come, plural. So already a quarter of the public lands have already been leased to do what it was you saw in the Allegheny. I propose here, officially propose, that since a quarter of them are already leased, so the industry has control of a quarter of our public lands, which we have the constitutional right to, I'd like to propose here, and maybe have our panel members and other studio audience members consider this. I'd like to propose that half of our public lands remain public. And I'd like to suggest that those public lands are available to generations not yet born. I'd like to suggest that the other quarter of the public lands be set aside maybe for hunting and recreation and water. So I'd like to propose that the remaining 3/4 of the public lands be preserved for generations not yet born and the young people who are in the room.
DCNR and state game lands have very strict access rules. They understand what their lands are. We actually have been working with them to build our pad sites on former strip mines that we can then reclaim, and that helps everybody. We have also worked with them to plant certain types of clover when we reclaim a pad to bring more elk over from Elk County into Clearfield County. That promotes more tourism. So there's a lot of ways that we can work and help the environment and help the tourism industry and all that sort of thing. So without, just coloring it as that we have access to all of those lands, there is certain areas we are absolutely restricted from going into. And if you go to DCNR's website, they had showed the maps of the last lease sale, and it shows where industry can access on those leases and where we cannot. And there's quite a bit. There's view sheds, there's certain trees that they've marked off where industry can't go into, and it is quite an extensive amount.
And I'll give a specific example of this in the Allegheny Forest. The Interior Department said to the industry last year, well, we're going to just slow this thing down a bit. So now the Interior Department, our federal government, said to the industry, we're going to slow this thing down a bit. Well, the industry decided to sue. So the industry sued the government because they weren't moving quick enough, handing over our public lands quick enough. So there's an ongoing case now regarding that issue.
And land use and public policy issues, I'm sorry, we're going to continue with the questions up here. The land use and public policy issues are certainly another area that we haven't even touched on early in tonight's discussion, but with all due respect to this person's card I'm holding, I would like to go to the next question.
Sharon, I'm sorry, that was my card, and
Oh.
I actually circled the one I wanted you to ask. 'Cause
Oh.
many of them got answered as the
Okay.
discussion went along, so it's the very last question on the card is
Okay.
the one that I really wanted.
What are the penalties for violations? Are they steep enough to be useful deterrents to violations? And Jennifer, this was directed to you.
Well, it depends on what the violation is. So it's dependent on the violation, it's depending on the history of the operator, if they have there's been a history of these violations, all of that goes into the severity of whether or not, water streams are impacted in any way. All of that goes into the calculation. So it depends on what the violation is. I guess I can't really give a number, but I can tell you that it's not our only compliance tool. We have a number of companies where we've had violations that were pending, and when that happens, we don't issue the permits that are pending. So that's probably our biggest compliance tool. If we have violations, then those permits sit until the violations are resolved. So that's, another one of our compliance tools beyond penalties.
Okay, Jennifer, there's a couple other questions directed to you, and I was told it has to be one that's really short. So this is the shortest one. What is the optimum ratio of inspectors to open sites to ensure compliance with environmental protection laws? Is your agency there, or do you need more inspectors? Or will you need them in the future, but not necessarily right now?
Yes, I'm sure that's a safe answer to say we will need them in the future. Based on what we've heard from the major players in the Marcellus area and what their projections are in terms of activity, we will definitely need more as time goes on.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. That's all the time we have for questions this evening. Again, the questions will be posted with responses. Thank you for your time, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you very much.
And I'd just like to thank all of our panelists, and I would like to thank all of you for attending this evening and for your questions, your thoughtful questions, and also the University of Scranton for providing us with this facility and the room. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry.